Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Nabi Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, brothers and sisters, to another installment of our weekly program, Analyzing the Address, where we revisit the day's khutbah. We talk about it in a little bit additional detail. We put it under the microscope and expand on parts of the khutbah that we were not able to expand upon given the time constraints, and we even offer you the opportunity, if you so choose, to critique the khutbah, to offer any feedback and ask any questions you might have about it. And today's khutbah was kind of a farewell khutbah in which we offered some Wasiyyah, some exhortations, some parting words of advice, parting words of encouragement. And before I get to commenting on the contents of the khutbah, I wanted to begin with a little bit of a disclaimer. After the khutbah was over, and I think we had closed the feed by then, and so I don't think that part was on the live video or the video that was uploaded to Facebook. But after the khutbah, I do think it's important because there were a lot of people obviously there. After the khutbah, one of the very good brothers in the community, he spoke from the heart about his feelings about the situation. And we know what the situation is without specifying. And in the course of his remarks, he seemed to say that I had indicated in the khutbah that the community needed to be angry at the board and they need to be strong against the board. Now, it's possible, one, that I misheard him, that's not what he said at all, but I just misheard him. That's possible. It's also possible that I heard him correctly, but he simply misspoke, meaning that he did say those things, but he didn't mean to say those words. And it's also possible that he was simply overcome with emotion. So he said those words and he meant those words, but those words came from emotion and not from really thinking through what he said. At any rate, irrespective of that, I know the brother very well, and I believe he has a very good heart. أحسبه كذلك والله حسيبه. And he has expressed to me repeatedly that he is not happy about the decision. He's expressed that to me face to face. He's expressed that to me through email. So I get all that. But I want to be here because this was said in public. I want to say in public that I want to be emphatically clear that although I have very strong feelings about the decision and the process with which the decision was made and the way the decision was delivered, I have strong feelings about that. In spite of all that, I want to be emphatic in saying that I do not want to incite division within the community. I do not want to foment tensions within the community. I don't want to leave ill feelings between community members and the board in my wake. That is not my intention in any way, shape, or form. A decision was made, and we are all free to have our own individual feelings about that decision. But at the end of the day, we are all Muslim brothers and sisters, and we have a duty to foster the true spirit of community, the true spirit of brotherhood and sisterhood within our ranks. And that means working with the board and not against them. Peacefully resolving differences with the board as opposed to harboring hard feelings or hostilities toward them. We do not want hostility between the members of the community, whether they be in the board, outside of the board, or otherwise. We don't want any hostilities between the community. I don't want anyone to think that is what I want to happen as a result of my departure or after my departure. I don't want anyone to fight the board on my behalf. But what I want you to do is be active in the politics of the masjid and to calmly and respectfully voice concerns and clarify the decisions you would like the board to make on your behalf. That's what I meant by the part of the khutbah that I think the brother was referencing when he said what he said. And I'm going to talk about that more when we get to the Wasiyyah, but I just wanted to make that disclaimer at the outset. I want to be emphatically clear that I do not want to foment tensions. I do not want to leave problems between community members in my wake. I don't want anyone to think that because they like me or love me or don't want me to leave, that what I want them to do on my behalf is to make problems, make trouble. That's not what I want. I want the community to come together and work together with the board for what is best for the community, what is best for the masjid, and what is right by Allah and by the deen of Allah. That's what I want the people to do, and I want to be emphatic about that. So if anyone has any questions about what my intentions are, those are my intentions. And please act accordingly. I ask everyone who hears my words to act accordingly. Like with that said, we started the khutbah by talking about this Sunnah of Tawasi, this Sunnah of mutual exhortation and mutual giving of advice and mutual exchange of words of encouragement by the early Muslims, which they adapted from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, in which anytime one of his companions was intending to travel, he would give that person parting words of advice. He would give them a Wasiyyah. And so thereafter, the Muslims adopted this Sunnah, and wherever they were, whenever they were in the company of their companions, or if there were distance between them and they thought of them. For example, one person was in Mecca, another person was in Baghdad, for example. Then when he would think of his brother, he would write to him a Wasiyyah, give him words of encouragement, etc. It became a very common practice for the Muslims. And one example that was given by Imam Ahli Mecca fi zamanihi, the Imam of the people of Mecca in his time, his era, Ibn Uyayna, Sufyan ibn Uyayna. One example he gave is that he said that the ulama of his time, the ulama of his time and the time prior to his era, they used to write to each other periodically. They would write to each other periodically. They would write 3 words or 3 sentences, 3 words of advice they would give to each other. The first one, Man aslaha sariratahu aslaha Allahu alaniyata. They would write to their brother and say, remember that whoever rectifies his inside, Allah will rectify his outside. Whoever refines his heart and his soul, Allah will refine what? His exterior. And they would write to each other, وَمَنْ أَصْلَحَ مَا بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ اللَّهِ أَصْلَحَ اللَّهُ مَا بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Whoever rectifies what is between him and Allah, his relationship with Allah, Allah will rectify his relationship with the people. وَمَنْ عَمِلَ لِآخِرَتِهِ كَفَى اللَّهُ أَمْرَ دُنْيَاهِ. That whoever works tirelessly for his hereafter, Allah will suffice him the affairs related to his herein. And so this is one example of the Wasiyyah that the early Muslims would give to each other. And so this is an example of what we're talking about, of this practice of exhorting each other and giving advice to each other when we part. Even if we're parting for a short period of time. A person meets someone for Jum'ah, a good friend of his, and they chat after Salat al-Jum'ah, and they're about to part ways. And you're probably not going to see him again till maybe sometime in the midweek. You'll catch him for one of the prayers in the masjid, or you may not catch him until what? Next Jum'ah. You give him a Wasiyyah. And it's very important, brothers and sisters, for us to have friends and colleagues and associates who will give us their candid opinions. They will speak to us candidly and frankly about us, about their opinion of us, about the opinion of things that their opinion of things that we may have said or done that are questionable. And they will advise us and tell us where we've gone wrong and how we can make ourselves right. And this is a gift from Allah. And friends like this who will tell you the truth, they're the true friends, but friends like this, true friends like this, are few and far between. As the proverb goes, Sadiquka man sadaqaka, la man saddaqak. That your true friend is the one who tells you the truth, not the one who tells you simply what you want to hear. And true friends like this, when you have true friends like this, know that you have a true friend. That's really a true friend. And this is part of the meaning of what the Prophet said when he said, Al-maru ala dini khalili, falyandur ahadukum man yukhalil. A person will follow the faith of his closest companion, his dear friends. So be careful who you take as friends or companions. Part of the meaning of that is, if you have a friend who will be candid with you, that person is religious, and he'll be candid with you about some of the areas where you're slacking in your religion, that's a good friend. And if he's religious and you associate with him and you are constantly getting advice from him, inshallah, you're going to be like him, inshallah ta'ala. The next wasiyyah that we gave was the wasiyyah, the first wasiyyah that we gave after talking about the general importance of giving al-wasiyah. The first wasiyyah that we gave was al-wasiyyah bit-taqwa. The wasiyyah to have the fear of Allah, or the consciousness of Allah, if you will. And this is the wasiyyah of Allah for the first and for the last of his servants. This is something which Allah has filled the Quran with, this wasiyyah. There are tens of ayat, maybe even hundreds of ayat, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exhorts his followers, exhorts his worshippers, I should say, to have a taqwa. Everywhere you look in the Quran, Allah is encouraging us to be from al-muttaqeen. For example, Allah says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu taqullaha haqqa tuqatihi wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun. O you who believe, fear Allah, have taqwa of Allah as he ought to be feared, and do not die except as Muslims. He says, wattaqullaha inna Allaha shadidul iqab, and fear Allah, have taqwa of Allah, indeed he is stern in punishment, or severe in punishment. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu taqullaha wabtaghu ilayhi al-wasila. O you who believe, have fear of Allah and seek a means of being near to him, drawing near to him, and so on and so forth. So many ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is encouraging us to have a taqwa. And we need to understand, brothers and sisters, that being exhorted by our brothers and sisters in faith to have taqwa is not an insult and is not an accusation. Don't think that if a person is telling you, Ya akhi, ittaqillah. Ittaqillah. Ya ukhti, ittaqillah. Oh, my brother, have fear of Allah, have taqwa. Oh, my sister, have taqwa. Don't consider it an accusation as if a person is saying that you don't have taqwa. You need to develop this quality. That's how a lot of people receive it. That's how it lands with a lot of people, and it shouldn't. It is not an accusation. And one of the clearest indications that it's not an accusation is that the Prophet ﷺ in the hadith of Al-Irbad ibn Sariyah, Al-Irbad, he mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ gave them a maw'idah, gave them an admonition. And he gave this admonition to who? To the companions, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim. Who are the companions? They're the most pious people in Islam. The most pious people in the history of mankind. As the Prophet said, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ قَرْنِي ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ. The best of mankind is my generation, my companions. Then that generation which follows them, then the generation that follows them. They're the best of people. They were very pious, extremely pious. But Al-Irbad, he mentions that the Prophet gave them an admonition. And when he gave the admonition, وَجِلَتْ مِنْهَا الْقُلُوبِ وَضَرَفَتْ مِنْهَا الْعُيُونِ. He said that our hearts were shaken by it, and our eyes flowed with tears. They were weeping. So then they said, كَأَنَّهَا مَوْعِظَةُ مُوَدِّعٍ فَأَوْصِنَا. They said, O Messenger of Allah, it's as if you're giving us a parting admonition, as if you're going to bid farewell to us. فَأَوْصِنَا. So give us an exhortation, give us a wasiyyah. And what was the wasiyyah that the Prophet gave? It was not a very long wasiyyah, but it had several parts to it. And the first part, he said, Usikum bitaqwallah. He said, I exhort you to have the fear of Allah, to have taqwa. The Prophet said this to who? To the companions. So it's not an insult, it's not an attack, it's not an accusation. But actually, remember, a taqwa is the key to all good. Good in this world, good in the hereafter. And you see this in the Quran. Allah connects having taqwa with gifts He'll give people in this world. Gifts He'll give people in the hereafter. It is the key to all good. So when a person exhorts you to have taqwa, they are in reality wishing you nothing but good in this world and the next. We should be honored, not insulted, if a person says, Ya akhi, ittaqillah. طيب. The second wasiyyah that we gave was al-wasiyyah bittiba' al-kitabi was sunnah. The exhortation to follow the Quran and Sunnah as understood and applied by the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. And this really, in reality, following the Quran and Sunnah as understood by the companions is religion at its core. It is what it means to follow Islam. That Islam, what is it? It is following the Quran and Sunnah as understood by the companions of Muhammad ﷺ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about how being guided is directly connected with following the Quran and Sunnah as understood by the companions. He says in the Quran, he says, فَإِنْ آمَنُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا آمَنْتُمْ بِهِ فَقَدْ اهْتَدَوْا. If they, the people who come after the companions, meaning you and me, believe as you, the companions, believe, they will be guided. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically saying that guidance is directly linked to following the Quran and Sunnah the way that they understood it, believing the way they believe, behaving the way they behaved. The Prophet said in the hadith, he said, قَدْ تَرَكْتُمْ عَلَى الْبَيْضَاءِ قَدْ تَرَكْتُكُمْ عَلى الْبَيْضَاءِ آسف قَدْ تَرَكْتُكُمْ عَلى الْبَيْضَاءِ. He said, I have left you upon the clear path. لَيْلُهَا كَنَهَارِهَا. Its night is like its day. It's always easy for you to find your way on the straight path. You'll never get lost by night or by day. لَيْلُهَا كَنَهَارِهَا. It's so clear what the truth is, what the straight path is, if you just follow what? The Quran and Sunnah. لَا يَزِيغُ عَنْهَا إِلَّا هَالِكٌ. And no one will deviate from it except one who is doomed to ruin. And Ibn Mas'ud, he used to say, اتَّبِعُوا وَلَا تَبْتَدِعُوا فَقَدْ كُفِيتُمْ. Follow, meaning follow the Quran and Sunnah as understood by the companions. وَلَا تَبْتَدِعُوا. And do not innovate, do not invent, do not introduce new ways of worshiping Allah and new ways of believing that you have no basis for in the Quran and Sunnah, the understanding of the early Muslims. فَقَدْ كُفِيتُمْ. Because you have been sufficed. Everything you need to be successful, everything you need for salvation is in the Quran and Sunnah as understood by the companions. The third wasiyyah that we gave was Al-Wasiyyah bil-Hadar min al-Bid'ah. We exhorted our brothers and sisters to avoid innovations, unprecedented beliefs and practices in the religion, heresies. Brothers and sisters, we are living in times of great confusion. There are so many people who are using all of these different wasa'il al-ijtima'iyyah, all these different forms of media. Using all of these different forms of media, al-i'lam, to spread their beliefs, many of which have no basis in the Quran and Sunnah, in the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the pure teachings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. They're spreading practices and ideas about how to worship Allah, which, again, have no basis in the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the Quran and Sunnah as understood by the early Muslims. And many people, because the people who are spreading these ideas, they are so charismatic, they are so well-spoken, they are so credentialed and so well-educated. Many people are shaken by that, and they have doubt about whether or not what they're saying is supported by the Quran and Hadith, because they don't reference the Quran and Hadith when they speak. But they speak so eloquently. They're so charismatic, and they're so credentialed, they have so many followers. People get fooled by that and start to doubt whether or not they should follow this person or not. Part of them says no, because he's not supporting what he's saying with the sources of Islam, the foundational source of Islam, Quran and Hadith. But at the same time, he has so many followers and he's so charismatic, etc. They become confused. Brothers and sisters, when in doubt, when you can't verify the truthfulness, the correctness, the veracity of what you're being told to believe and told to do, a person's not supporting what they're saying with Quran and Hadith, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْحَانَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Produce your proof if you're truthful. A person truthful, he's always going to reference you and refer you back to the Quran and Sunnah. So if you can't verify, when in doubt, do without. As the Prophet said in the Hadith, دَعْ مَا يَرِيبُكْ إِلَى مَا لَا يَرِيبُكْ. Leave what makes you doubt for that which does not make you doubt. If you're not certain that what you're doing is supported by the Quran and Hadith, then don't do it. Don't fall for it. You're better to do without. Better to err on the side of caution. Why? Because the Prophet said in the Hadith, مَنْ عَمِلَ عَمَلًا لَيْسَ عَلَيْهِ أَمْرُنَا فَهُوَ رَدٌّ. Whoever does a religious deed which we have not legislated, it will be rejected. Then the fourth wasiyyah that we gave was al-wasiyyah bi-imarat al-masjid, the wasiyyah, the exhortation to take care of the house of Allah. We said that that's two parts. One is regularly visiting the masjid, frequenting the masjid. And we said the second part is actively partaking and engaging in the upkeep and running of the masjid. And here, I think, is where some of the confusion occurred, and some of the comments that were made after Salatul Jum'ah were made based upon what some people understood from what I intended from this part. And I just want to reiterate, I said in the khutbah, I said, this means you can't be a spectator, but rather you must play a more active role in decision making and ensuring that the masjid serves the purpose it was meant to serve and is run in accordance with Islamic principles and teachings. And what I meant, and I'm going to reiterate what I said at the outset, what I meant by that was we have to be active rather than passive, but we have to calmly, respectfully make our voices heard. Calmly and respectfully make our voices heard. And we have to leave no room for ambiguity regarding the decisions we would like the board to make. We do have to be clear with them and say to them, for example, in this case, and I don't want to make it about me, but just in this case, because this is the situation we're dealing with right now. If you want them to retain the imam, then you have to say that. And you have to let them know, look, this is what we want. This is a decision that we want to be made. And if there's something that we need to do as a community to make that possible, if there's a part of the bargain, a part of making that happen that you need us to perform, then let us know what that is. That's what I'm talking about. That is what I was speaking about in the khutbah. Just making your voice and what you want and the decisions you want the board to make, making that heard and making that known, but calmly and respectfully. Also, the second part of that is when opportunities present themselves to select board members, you can't be indifferent. You can't be disinterested. You can't just be a person who you mail it in. And what I mean by that is that you don't even vote. You don't look at it to see who the candidates are. You just let the election come and go without even paying attention to who even got elected at the end of the day. You can't take that approach. You can't take the hands-off approach, sit idly by and let things happen. You have to be one of the people who makes things happen and takes an active role in making them happen. And also, if you have the time to volunteer and serve, you should do so. This is what we meant by that part of the khutbah. We did not mean, and I want to be emphatic about this again, that you're supposed to just perpetually fight the board now because you don't like the decision. The decision happened and it's beyond reversible. So we have to make the best of the situation as it is. We have to deal with things as they are, not as we wish they were. And so the community has to come together. They have to work with the board and figure out, okay, what are we going to do now? What's going to be our next step? Because we can't remain imamless. We can't continue to go for a long period of time without an imam. It's not healthy for the masjid. As we talked about last week, that imams are an essential part of successful communities. So how can we get there? How can we help you as a community get there? And that's what I meant by the khutbah. We don't want to have this perpetual feud with the board. I'm not encouraging that. I don't want that. And I don't want people to do that, think they're doing it on my behalf. No, that's not what we want. It's time to work together now. It's time to close ranks. And it's time to get to work on how we can make things better going forward. The last wasiyyah that we gave was Al-Wasiyyah bi mu'amalat an-nas bi khuluqin hasan. The exhortation to treat other people, particularly Muslims, with the most excellent standard of character and behavior in interpersonal relations. And this is really important, brothers and sisters. It is really important for us to reserve our best behavior, our kindest treatment, and our finest interpersonal relations for our brothers and sisters in Islam, our fellow Muslims, regardless of our physical differences. And what I mean by physical differences, that encompasses our different occupations. That irrespective of what job you have and the other person has, a career path that they've taken and you've taken, you should treat them kindly and treat them with respect. Irrespective of our differences in education, our differences in socioeconomic status, our differences in terms of color, ethnicity, race, nationality, language. Irrespective of all of that, if the person on the other side, your interlocutor, is a Muslim, then they are entitled to the absolute respect, the most absolute. They are entitled to absolute respect and to dignity and to honor and to kind treatment and to the best of manners and the best of interpersonal relations, etc. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, Muhammadun Rasulullah walladhina ma'ahu ashidda'u wal-kuffari ruhama'u baynahum. He says Muhammad is a messenger of Allah, and those who are with them, they are stern toward the non-believers, but merciful amongst themselves. They reserve their finest conduct and character, the best of their behavior, they reserve it for the Muslims. And often, brothers and sisters, we behave, especially here in the environment that we currently live, we behave in the opposite way. We're very kind and very considerate and very respectful. We go out of our way to show a great deal of respect to the non-Muslims, to honor them, to fawn over them. They may come to the masjid and visit the masjid, for example. They may come to the masjid to see what Muslims do, how they worship. And when they come, we fawn over them. We respect them. We laud them. We're on our best behavior. And in the same instant, we may pass in the masjid while non-Muslims are there, pass a Muslim, and we frown at him or her. We roll our eyes at them. We don't give them salams. We don't even acknowledge their presence. This is the opposite of what we should do. Because at the end of the day, that person, regardless of who they are, how they look, what their occupation is, what their socioeconomic status is, by virtue of being believers, they have earned the right to be respected and to be revered by you, to be venerated by you. Just because of what? Because of their faith. And so this is very important for us to realize, and this was one Wasiyyah that I really wanted us to take away from the khutbah. And we concluded obviously by thanking as many people as we could generally. And I hope the opportunity will come for me to speak to and write to certain individuals specifically and directly, and to tell them how much I appreciate them. But I just want to give general thanks to the community for all that you've done, including those of you who are with me now and who will tune in later, who have followed these programs and supported these programs throughout the pandemic. We've been coming online weekly, sometimes 2, 3 times, 4 times a week, and you've been there. And if you couldn't be there live, you followed up later, and I really, really appreciate your supporting the programs in this way. May Allah reward you, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thank you as I thank you. I also wanted to mention, we mentioned this previously, and I'll mention it again. Obviously, we're coming to the last few days of my tenure, and these durus, these lessons, and these programs will no longer be there. But as I told you before, I do have my own personal channel on YouTube, which I've started with a few of my colleagues under the title Al-Ansari. And I also have a linked Instagram and Facebook account as well under the title of Al-Islam Al-Safi or Al-Safi, AS-SAAFIY. Look for us, look for our content. I'll try to post one of the links or videos, video links in the comments, so that if you have not already joined us and subscribed, you can subscribe. But please, brothers and sisters, let's continue to be connected. Let's continue to share this knowledge together. And let's do that through this second medium, which is the YouTube page and the Instagram and Facebook pages. Please join us. Please subscribe to Al-Safi, and let's continue to connect. Even though I won't be here, we can still be together, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.